Hello, Cheryl. So good to have you on my show today.
Awesome. Good to see you any which way.
Yes, I agree. It's fun to see you too. I just wish we were in the same room.
I know, me too.
Well, listeners, you are in for a treat today. I have a good friend of mine and someone I've admired for years, Sharol Josephson. She is an amazing speaker, communicator, leader. And, with my podcast really focusing on leadership coaching and what that looks like for 3C living and leading, Cheryl's someone that came to mind. She also was an endorser for my book. And so I just asked Cheryl if she would be a responder to what it is that she's been reading. And I think what I love about Cheryl is her experience in just communication. So I'm going to let her tell us a little bit about herself, but she is currently the National Director for Family Life Canada. And she's also got some great career history that I wanted to share a little bit. But Cheryl, tell us a little bit of what you do now and a little bit of where you came from, and then we'll jump into our conversation today.
Sure. So along with my husband, I lead an organization called Family Life Canada, which is all about providing resources and tools to people in relationships. So that would be primarily family relationships, husbands, wives, parents, kids, but all sorts of relationships. We primarily do kind of larger conferences, in-person conferences, although that kind of changed in the last few years. We've adopted a lot of digital kind of conferences and seminars as well. But I love what we do. And probably my favorite thing to do in all of that is not the public speaking, although I do enjoy that with Neil, but I love the one-on-one coaching with couples and individuals. So that's super fun. And we've been doing that for about 16 years, both here and in California, where we met. And before that, I spent about 25 years in the television news business. So I was a news anchor and producer. And so I've sort of had two parts to my career life, this kind of intense news phase for 25 years. Now I call this my softer phase. I'm more about relationships and family. And I think, honestly, I'll just tell you really quickly why I made the change. Some of it was I just felt like I was reporting on all this kind of dysfunction in our world. And I felt like, instead of just reporting on it, I actually want to get involved and do something about it. And the more you kind of distill things down, the more you realize, and I'm sure you bump into this all the time, Heather, in your work, is so much of who we are and who we become is from our family of origin. So our parents and then of course the next most influential person in our life is our lifetime partner. And so those relationships are so crucial for, to who we are. So anyway, I love what we do. It's been great. It's been a great run. So there you go.
I love it. That's a great nutshell of your life, but of course it doesn't hit everything. I got the privilege of working with Cheryl on one of her leadership teams. So I got to be under her, I don't know, gosh, was that almost 15 years ago, Cheryl? It was a while back.
Oh, I know.
But I got to be the recipient of some of your coaching too. And then we moved into a friendship and we've been eyeballing each other.
You're coaching me. It's awesome.
Oh, it's reciprocal. But we're from different countries right now. She's back in Canada. I'm here in America, but we try not to let our two different countries just divide us at all and keep us right next to each other, huh?
That's right.
You said something earlier about the softer phase. I love that phrase. And here's what I love about it too, because part of 3C living and leading is this permission. The name of the book is The Life You're Made For.
Yeah.
But this idea of reinventing yourself, I think that's what I loved about you. And I think that's where we've always synced. I mean, weren't we always joking? Oh, I'm going to do that when I grow up. Oh, I'm going to do that when I grow up, right? Talk to us a little bit about that idea of reinventing yourself, even in middle age, because that's a lot of what I hear, this false belief of, well, I'm 42, I can't do that. Or I'm 55, I can't do that. I think what I've loved about you is this kind of true belief of it's never too late. And you and I have always just cheered each other on like, it's never too late. Let's try a new career. So talk to us a little bit about that and what came behind that and what propelled you into trying something completely different than journalism.
Yeah. Well, can I back up the bus even one more stage? There was a stage where I opted out. I was fully engaged with my news anchor career. And I made the choice to step away from it for 5 years for family reasons. It started with a night the kids called me by the nanny's name, which triggered something in me, and honestly sent me into some real moments of clarity, or some really like, what do I want my life to be about? Who am I? What's really important? What are my values? What do I want to say at the end of my life, looking back? So I opted out of my career for 5 years. And at the time, I didn't know it was for 5 years, because what was courageous, to use your 3C's language, about the move was I really didn't know if I'd ever get back in. You know, I was 6 o'clock news anchor in Vancouver, which is the number 2 market in Canada, which is like LA in the States. So, you know, New York is first, LA. So it's kind of, it was a big deal. And I kind of had the sense like, I'm never going to get back. I'm never going to get back. So I had to make the choice, not knowing how it would turn out. And sure enough, 5 years later, I got back into it, and kind of more on my terms, to be honest. So I think it's a long way of answering your question, but that's important, because when I came to do this major life change from journalism to relationships, I'd had the confidence that things work out. And not always the way you anticipate, but things work out. And if you just lean in and go for broke, things have a way of kind of sorting themselves out. So while it was really intimidating, so we got asked to lead a marriage ministry in a church, was kind of how we got into this. And I'd never done anything like that before. I mean, I'd read books about marriage and I had one. But that was pretty much the extent of my experience. And so I'm like, oh man, I'm so in over my head. But I think because I'd made that radical change before, felt really good about it, I kind of had the guts to do it again. And then now, interestingly enough, Heath, Neil and I are talking about kind of semi-retirement in 18 months. And so I'm back in that phase again. Like I want to, what's next? And do I have the guts now at 63 to launch into something completely new and different? And I think, again, I think you get a lot of courage and a lot of confidence from having been through those a few times in your life. I think every time you make a radical change, it gets a little bit easier. And I think it's one of those things, it's way more scary in the front mirror or the front window than it is in the back mirror. Like sort of like you don't know what it's going to be. And so you have to launch out, even though you don't know how it's going to turn out. But anyway, long answer to your short question. But I love your 3Cs. First of all, where was your book 16 years ago when I really needed it?
I had to work it out, Cheryl. The 3Cs came from me, figured out my own clarity, confidence, and courage. And so it's hindsight, right?
Well, and actually, as I was thinking about this interview this morning, I was thinking, you know what? Actually, I got a chance to kind of see you working these things out in real time.
You did.
Because I came into your life in a season that was really difficult for you.
Very hard.
And I remember just kind of being an observer and hopefully a bit of a fellow sojourner in this, but kind of watching you figure this out. It was, which is why I could endorse the book and endorse this concept wholeheartedly, because I've seen it work in your life. And then as I've applied some of those things to my life, I know it works.
Yes. I love that we're still friends, because you did come into the hardest season of my life. And as a new friend, and then hearing all of the things that I would process with you, I wanted to always give this disclaimer. I swear I'm not usually this big of a mess. And you just loved me through it. And that's what I knew we were going to be lifelong friends throughout all the different changes. But I think you got this idea of it's messy when you're trying to change it. And I think that people see us, when I say us, I see you and me, they see us on the other side of change. And I think that's where I want to just kind of pull back the veil and say, it does get messy. And we deal with the same insecurities. I was shocked at some of the change that I was dealing with, some of the same insecurities that I did at 22, coming out of college. You know, like, can I do this? Am I equipped for this?
Yeah.
Isn't that shocking that some of that comes up? And here I am 52 and you're in your later 60s. Okay, thanks. I didn't want to say it.
No,
okay.
You go ahead.
Yeah. We're proud of that every year, huh?
Yeah.
But you said this belief of things work out, you know, and you hear me use the phrase false belief and true belief in the book. And part of how I learned to move through some of these hard stages in my life was to get really concrete and say, this is a false belief, which is, and I heard you mention earlier, I'm out of the game. If I take a pause and take care of my family or my kids, I'm out of the game. And I hear that all the time with caretakers, both men and women.
Yeah.
And being able to have that courage, the clarity of, I get to take care of my family, the confidence to really deal with the beliefs around that, and then the courage to take action on it. Can you speak to that a little bit in that process? Because I heard you just mention the false belief and the true beliefs throughout that time. And the true belief I wrote down was things work out. And I just love that.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that process of what went on inside of you internally, because it's never as easy as people think it is. You know, they look at us at the end product, and I want to say there was a journey behind this. Tell us a little bit about that journey and that catalyst and the vulnerability behind some of that.
Well, yeah. As you probably know, I'm a pretty typical type A. I got a lot of my affirmation from my work. I was kind of addicted to work, had that can't afford to fail mentality that you reference in the book. And I kind of felt like, there was a lot at risk, to be honest, to walking away from it the first time. And I honestly have spent the last 2 decades of my life kind of reframing that mentality that I'm not who I am not what I do. And I've, really tried to lean into there's a value in being rather than doing, but getting there, I think when I really had to see, I had to project my life forward and say, okay, if I keep on this path for another 10 years or another 20 years, which could have easily done, what's that going to look like? And who am I going to be? And when I look back on my life, what am I going to be proud of and grateful for? And what am I going to regret? And so I don't want to live too much in the future, because I think we can do that too much. But I think there's a real value in saying, what's the end game? And what do I want my life to look like? What do I want my legacy to be? What do I want my family to look like? What do I want my relationships to be like? What do I want my soul to be like? And then back it up and say, what do I have to change to get there? And and you walk us through that process so beautifully in your coaching and in your book. But for me, it looked like the choice was, I didn't want a family that was, I wanted a family that was close, and I didn't want my whole life to be about my kids, but I really wanted my kids to feel like they were a priority. I wanted my husband to feel like he was a priority. I kind of had the sense that I can rise to the top of the news world in Canada, because I didn't have aspirations beyond that. And I wasn't good enough, but if I lose my family in the process, my life will not be, I will not consider my life a success. And so then I kind of had to back up the bus. But I think some of it, to be honest, at that point in my life was I didn't know how to integrate well. I think you talk about that so beautifully in the book, is learning how to integrate. And I think once, even that 5-year time out, I learned so much about myself. And so when I did go back to news, and actually my career really took off even when I went back, even more, because I was more confident in who I was and more comfortable in saying no and kind of defining what success looked like for me, rather than having somebody define it for me. And I was just in a much better place when I came back. So I think the process, back to your question about the process, it started for me with looking at the end game and then working my way back.
I love that. I love that because, as a coach, and I work with a lot of high achievers, and I do a lot of leadership coaching in organizations. And I think what makes me unique as a coach is I'm very into the holistic mind, body, heart, spirit, and use the word soul. And I love that too. And even in my book, in my introduction, I talk about my faith is important to me. But the other thing that hit me as you were talking is the value of good questions. And even as you were talking, I was quickly jotting them down because I love great questions. And I heard you say, what does success look like? And what do I want my soul to be like? I think if we are asking good questions, we allow kind of our inner wisdom, our connection with the higher power, God, or whatever you call it, to guide us through this process. But if we're asking the wrong questions, like how do I make more money, or how do I be at the top of my career, those are soul killing questions. So I love that you made that connection there, and it made me think of the state of your soul. So I'm going to go really deep here because we both like to.
Go for it.
What do I want my soul to look like? Can you ask and answer that question right now on the spot? What do you want your soul to look like?
Yeah, I want to be at peace. I want to recognize, well, I'll just be real blunt. I'm a Jesus follower. I'm a Christian. It's a big part of who I am. So I really want my soul to be in touch with my creator. And I really want, I want to live my life out of my inner, a really well inner person. I love some of your stay practices in the book. I thought those are so great. Stay curious, stay empathetic, I can't think of them all now, stay humble.
Yes.
And I always think of the Tim McGraw thing, always be humble and kind. I think about that. I think those are good soul words for me. I want to have a humble soul, recognizing that there is a God and I'm not it.
Yes.
And I want to live my life that way, that there are things that are bigger than me and more important than me. Yeah. But that I am important. I'm in the Christian worldview, I'm beloved of God. I'm uniquely created. I have a purpose and a plan in this life. And I think kind of holding those two things, like I'm kind of a big deal. In the creator's eyes, I'm kind of a big deal. He spent a lot of time and energy thinking up who I was going to be. And I'm a big deal. And you kind of hold that. And then on the other hand, you kind of hold like, I'm not all that. And sort of recognizing I'm a human person with a bunch of flaws. And I'm actually kind of okay with kind of living in the tension of those two things. So if you don't hold the Christian worldview, I think your language might change, but I think all of us have to encounter that there's something beyond us, and there's, and yet who we are is important and valuable and kind of a big deal. Yes. And so my soul is well when I keep that in perspective, that yes, I'm loved, I'm beloved, I'm kind of special, and yet I'm just one of all of us human beings here on the planet trying to figure out how to do this life well. Yes, the human condition. Does that make sense? Yeah, I love how you said that, Cheryl, because again, as a person of faith, I take such comfort that I'm not alone, that there is a creator that has made me uniquely and is guiding me, and I live with that worldview. But really respect that people are all working out what that looks like to connect with something bigger than themselves. And I love listening to people's journey with that, but I do think that seems to be the core. I mean, look at even the AA, the 12 steps. Yeah. The first thing to break addiction is recognizing that there's a higher power. I just love that step. And it's kind of my faith credo, looking at those 12 steps is a lot of what I do, because there is that tension of confidence that we get to be proud of who we are, but we also get to recognize that we don't work really well as our own God, as our own big source. I don't want to be the source or the universe or the creator or the God or whatever your word that you like to use. I need to have something I can lean into. And I think it offers a sense of peace and a hope that our soul will be well. And we get to invite in these larger questions that define a much more transcendent definition of success. Yeah. Well, and then I think it helps us relate to each other better too. Like I think when our souls are well, it allows us to not see people as commodities. It allows us to see people as other souls. Yeah. And recognizing that, part of our job here on the planet is to help each other's souls be well. Yes. And I love what you write about, sort of that in the confidence section, is, that confidence, or the comparison piece. That's what like. I think when your soul is well and you're confident in who you are in the big picture of eternity, and the big universe picture, I think you can have a ton of grace for other people and enjoyment of other people. I think you're not threatened because your soul is well. So that comparison piece just kind of falls away. And I'll be really honest with you, that's been a hard one for me, because everything in the news business is about comparison. I mean, we get quarterly ratings reports, and you are literally rated compared to everybody else in your market. And there are numbers attached to how good you are and how valued you are. And so I think it was really hard for me to kind of get past that. I was more than my ratings. But I think when you get, and I guess what I would consider growth in my life is that I think I'm truly past that, and to the point where not only do I not need to compare myself with other people, I actually really revel in other people's success.
You do.
And I don't think you get there unless you've done all of the clarity work that you talk about, sort of that, like looking at the big picture. Who am I? What do I want? How's my soul? Am I well? And that's what I think makes us really great human beings.
I so agree. Wow, I love how you said that. I'm really glad this is recorded, Cheryl. I'm going to go back and listen to some of this.
Oh, man.
This idea of success, I work with, again, such high success-oriented people. And listening to you talk, I thought, oh my goodness, I also am a type A personality, but if I were being rated every week, or how often you were rated, it'd be like kryptonite for me.
Oh, man. It's hard. And
I
even
can't imagine.
Micro basis, people would call into the station and like, I don't like that color on Cheryl. It makes her look sick. Or, that lipstick really doesn't work for her. Like micro kind of ratings, like every day. And I'd meet people on the street and that thing you were wearing last week, don't ever do that again.
No.
Oh yeah. And then I met one sweet lady. She said, well, I watch you every night. And then she kind of backed off. She said, well, I just turn you on to see what you're wearing. And then I turn you off because I really don't want to watch the news. Isn't that awesome?
Oh, so I can't imagine.
You live in a world where external matters, where ratings are so, I think it's, and I think people in the corporate world have the same kind of challenges.
Oh yeah.
And to be able to live integrated, who I am on the inside is who I am on the outside, and who I am at work is the same as who I am at home, and who I am with my friends. To live that kind of seamlessly integrated life is really hard when you work in a climate of comparison and ratings and, quarterly reports. And I just think it's a challenge for all of us who are kind of achievers.
So well said. And I think that's where I want to pivot over to this idea of defining our own success, because if we don't, it gets defined for us. And you said a comment earlier that I wholeheartedly agree with, because I came to the same conclusion in my career. If I lose my marriage and my kids, that is not a successful life.
Yeah.
However, I was also going to figure out how to be successful in my career.
Yeah,
I just wasn't going to do it at the cost of that. So, and that's that either or we're here a lot, particularly as working women. We hear you are either going to be a good mother and wife, or you're going to be a career, but you can't have both. And I think the true belief I dared to grab onto, and I think this is what attracted us to each other, is we're going to figure it out. It's not easy, but we're going to figure out how to carve out the career, but not at the cost of our marriage. And I'm going on 30 years. I love your husband. Your marriage has been such an example to our marriage. How long have you all been married?
We've been married 44 years.
Oh my goodness.
I know.
So I want to just ask you a couple areas of what success looks like. And if you could come up with a true belief around it, as you look at marriage, what's the belief that you created around marriage? Because this is what I think grounded you in defining your own success.
Well, marriage has been a real journey for me because I was raised in a family where very traditional family. Mom territory was at home, raising children. Dad's territory was work, bringing home the bacon. And so I think I had to stop feeling guilty when I really wanted to go after success in my career. First of all, I had to recognize that that was a legitimate desire, and that it wasn't about me wanting to be somebody important or needing to be on a stage, or like, it really wasn't about that. This was kind of how I was wired. And I really wanted to use some of the giftedness and some of the kind of intuitiveness I have. My favorite thing to do in journalism was interviewing people, and I loved it, which is why I'm a little awkward on this side of the microphone.
You're doing great.
I like the other side better.
Maybe I'll bring you back on and have you interview me.
But I think I was actually really good at it. And I think some of that is just because I'm curious. I have lots of questions for people. And so, but I wanted a chance to use some of that giftedness. So I had to get over that tape in my head that I was being selfish or elevating my own interests above my kids and my husband. So kind of holding that, I had to get rid of that. I'm not sure I know. I think in marriage, it's a little challenging too, because there are two people involved. So I can decide that I want to integrate my life, my career, my family, and I want to have it all, which doesn't mean, I said no to a bunch of jobs because they weren't good for my family. One of them was a national morning show. And, but I would have had to get up at 4 a.m. and be at work at 4 a.m. So I would probably have to get up at, 2:30. And it would have meant I would have to go to bed at 6:00 at night and I just, there goes my family time. Yeah. So I said no. So I said no to things that weren't, so it's not like I didn't make any choices in favor of family, but anyway, my point was, it takes two people to decide that you're going to do both. And I really, really give Neil a ton of credit for my husband for helping me learn how to do that well, giving me lots of slack when and I think for me, for most time, it was like going over the red line, and that was recognizing, oh, that was the red line. And then you come back. And then you go over the red line in a different red line. And oh, yeah, that was over the red line. And you come back. And so I think a lot of my early career life was that kind of finding out what was doable, what was workable, what wasn't workable. And Neil had a ton of grace for me in that season, but I feel like I'm kind of rambling on this answer.
No, I love it. And it's leading me to my next question about your kids. You've got two boys.
You for another question, because I don't think I got that one very well.
Oh, no, it was good, because I think what you summed up, Cheryl, was this idea of it's always evolving. If it were an easy answer,
yes,
there wouldn't be 1 out of 2 divorces.
We'd be billionaires, right? For one thing.
Exactly. I know. So I threw you a curveball there going, this is going to be a hard question, and I don't expect it to be easy, but
yeah,
I think that's where we're not afraid of the hard questions, because after several decades of marriage, you and I have both said, basically, come hell or high water, we're going to stick this out. And there are times when it feels so difficult and hard. But I think what I'm learning in hindsight, looking back, and you met me in one of my difficult, hard stages, was we are both evolving. It's two people here. And sometimes we outgrow a marriage and we don't know that there's other options. So we just think we got to separate or divorce. And I think what I'm learning, or learned now after my 3rd decade, which I would love to pass on, is this true belief of it's worth it. It's worth it to stick it out. But we got married young, like you all, we were 23. How much do you evolve between 23 and 52? Yes. We grew up together. And so in hindsight, looking back, I'm going, the hardest times was me growing up and him growing up at the same time. And we were no longer in sync. So that scared us, but in reality, we were evolving. And so we got more and more comfortable of evolving. And even now we're like, oh, we have what we call a new marriage. We are not the same people when we got married. So speak a little bit to that. I know I can already see your face lighting up because it's not.
I tell people I've been married to like 5 or 6 husbands because my husband has changed over all these years. And he'd probably say he's been married to 25 wives because I've had so many different. So you're right. Every time you redefine yourself, you have to redefine your marriage, your relationship, because we can have great long-term healthy relationships that aren't marriages, but you have to redefine that. I think, and if you're both willing to say, that marriage that we had early on, and because early on ours was very role-based, it was very sort of rigid, and this, you do this, I do that, and this is how we're gonna, and because we didn't know anything different, either of us. So as we start growing up and as we start learning and developing, we have to change and have a new marriage, like you said. So we've probably had multiple marriages over the years. I think that's really great. And I think the challenge for a lot of the couples we work with is that those kinds of changes can be really threatening, especially if you're going away from sort of a pretty good kind of defined and regimented view of this is how we do it. You do this, I do this. And to saying, you know what, let's just clear the table. And let's figure out how to do marriage the way we are right now. And that's pretty intimidating for a lot of people. So sometimes what happens is one person's willing to go there and the other person isn't. And that creates some big challenges for sure.
It does. And learning how to trust the waiting period, you know, all of this, I feel like marriage has become one of my biggest teachers here on earth. And as the human condition, we're each strong individuals. And we both married strong individuals, and it made for challenging times when we were both evolving or pacing ourselves. But I think as I look at that and it transferred over into my work with people and humanity, you talk about grace. You mentioned this earlier. I think as I submitted to this process of allowing myself to evolve, allowing my life partner to evolve, and figuring out that pacing together, I feel like I became a kinder person. I became a more grace-filled person. And I really had to get in touch with, you talking about humility. You just feel like you're always bloated sometimes, you know, in the close relationships, but you feel so competent out in the world because there's much tighter boxes. I think choosing my family life over my career, and again, not letting my career suffer, but letting them both influencing one another, but making sure that I didn't lose my 2 kids and my marriage. I think it forced me to ask new questions. And I think that's what I want to invite in. And I want to be very careful to say, you didn't blow it if you lost your marriage or your kids. I don't want to say that in this conversation. I want to say we don't have enough conversations that are giving us options when it gets really hard. Wouldn't you agree?
I would totally agree. And I think that's why I said, I think it takes 2 people who have the same mind, the willingness to change, the willingness to adapt, the willingness to evolve. Because if one doesn't, I can see how marriages end. I for sure can. So I get that. So please understand, I'm not saying people who've chosen, you know, to go on all cylinders in their career are not choosing their family. I think it's such a complicated thing. But I will say, in my coaching with couples, in our coaching with couples, because sometimes I do it on my own, sometimes Neil and I do it together, but we've really benefited from your 3 C's living. I just I love so much of that. And I think the clarity piece is where we start with couples. You know, do you know what you want in your relationship? And a lot of times they've never even articulated what they want. And so helping them articulate what they want and clarify, then they can kind of, well, what's missing then in your life? And then what are the barriers to getting there? And then that gives us something to go to work on. And I think then, you know, in terms of the confidence, helping them reframe their thinking, giving them some new hope. one of the joys of our life is kind of being able to share other people's stories, and which gives hope to other, to people, like this sort of like, I'm trying to think of how to explain it. Well, the old Johnny Appleseed thing comes to mind. You just kind of, you gather things from one place and then you pull them together and you put them together in a different place. So like hearing stories in different places across the country and then connecting those stories to other people's realities and saying, you know what, this couple had the same problem, had the same issues, and being able to kind of, I think we borrow hope from each other, and we borrow courage from each other. And I think one of Neil's and my joys is being able to connect people's stories.
I love that.
So anyway, all in the coaching process. So I think that's the courage piece too. And then the don't do it alone piece. I love that about what you write, because I think a lot of people do try to do marriage alone.
Yes. And choose the right people. I think when you're in a vulnerable space, you want people that are you want to choose people that are holding these true beliefs, because you're not holding them very well. We might believe that we want to either stay in this relationship, whether it's marriage or work or whatever relationship we're grappling with, that's our clarity, but we don't have the confidence or the courage around it. The friendships are what help lend us those beliefs until we can get them deep down inside of us.
Yeah.
And I think that's, if I could give any encouragement to people when we're shifting in our lives, being able to say, choose the right people who will stay in the right beliefs with you. And it's okay that you don't feel it 100% yet. You might feel it like 2%. 2% counts. Grab onto it. Let them hold that 98% with you, and then let that continue to grow. And that's where our courage comes in, where we start allowing ourselves to evolve, defining our own level of success and saying what we believe success gets to look like, even if it's the opposite of what the world's telling us that we have to do or what it looks like. And I think that's what I've admired about your journey is, and even just listening to you, you talk about the 3 C's, clarity, confidence, and courage. I think always going back to the drawing board and go, wait a minute, is this what I want? Or am I being told this is what I should want?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Man, I love your 3 C's. They've been so helpful. I think I didn't have that kind of language in some of my earlier choices career-wise. But I went through cancer about 4 years ago, and I really lived into your 3 C's. Partly because I think, well, it was a challenge. So I think the pieces that really helped me were the clarity thing, sort of like, okay, well, how do I want to do this journey? How do I want to live my life? Kind of taking the time and the space, like you talk about the tire swing and the stars, and taking that time to figure out what I wanted, how I wanted this to be like. Because I mean, a lot of it was up beyond my control, but kind of how I lived it was within my control. And then, and I knew I didn't want to live with fear. I knew I wanted to live with joy, even in the middle of cancer. I'm out the other side, by the way, but
congratulations. Full remission, right?
Full remission. Yeah.
Oh,
but the confidence piece was a challenge for me, because that was sort of the day-to-day living into that clarity that I got. So I knew what I wanted. I knew how I wanted to do this, but then actually doing it was the real challenge. And I think that's where, just back to what you were talking about in terms of community. And I really had to borrow a lot of people's courage for that, in that journey. And I think it's crossed my mind a few times, like, I think maybe it's 4 C's living you're talking about, because there's a community piece. So you should rewrite the whole book.
Totally. I want it. Book 2.
But you actually integrate it really well in all your thinking. There's a community piece to all of these.
It is.
Where you live your 3 C's life. But man, community mattered a lot for me in that season. And it comes to mind, there's a great story on the Canadian prairies about farmers who back in the day,
Mm-hmm.
if they'd get caught in a blizzard, sometimes they could actually lose their way from the barn to their house, and they'd end off in this whiteout. They'd end up dying out in a field somewhere because they couldn't get back. So they would put these ropes from the barn to the house. And so then they could find their way back home if these storms came blowing in. And I sometimes use that analogy when I'm talking about the need for community. You need ropes in your life, but the challenge is those ropes have to be set up before the crisis comes, because you can't, in the middle of a blizzard, be setting out the ropes. You have to have those ropes in place. And so I guess my cancer journey helped me realize I'd put a lot of ropes in place in my life. And so when I needed it, there were a lot of places that I could go to hold on to. My faith was one, my marriage was one, my kids were some, my grandkids were some, but boy, I had a lot of friends in that journey with me. And so I love that there's so much kind of focus in all of your coaching on who are the people in your life and what are they telling you? And I think you're so right. If you have good people in your life, you can borrow so much from them. Yeah. And I've learned so much from you over the years. So.
Oh, and vice versa. Well, that makes me think of a personal example, Cheryl. I'm glad you brought that up. And by the way, you're not the only one that loves to add a fourth or fifth C on it. They're like, hey, you should do 4C, Libby. Yeah. I got another one is creativity. That's what my latest one. Someone's been telling me, hey, it needs to be 4C. So you're not alone with that. And I welcome it. Everybody tack on their C. But, I'm getting ready I just finished my second book, The Coaching Companion. I'm holding it up in my screen for those who are watching.
Awesome.
But I found myself a couple days ago out to lunch with a good friend, and one of those days where you're just tired and you're fatigued and you're feeling really alone. And she's all excited about the book. I'm not excited. I look at her and I whisper, I'm so tired and I feel very alone in this. And the tears just came to my eyes. And I'm telling you, it was just a very vulnerable moment. And the reason I'm sharing this because I always like to be transparent that says, this is what it looks like to borrow courage from someone else. This is what it looks like to battle those false beliefs. In my head, I know I'm not alone. In my head, I know I've got all those ropes. I didn't feel it in that moment, in that day. And I knew she was a safe place to whisper it to. And I remember her just reaching over, grabbing my hand and just saying, you're not alone. And it's so many exciting things. And she began to talk about all these ideas and visions she had for my book, which was hilarious, but it was exactly what I needed to hear because it was writing this momentum of what is my false belief? Does anybody really want what I'm offering? And those quiet moments at 2 a.m. morning, 2 a.m. in the morning kind of moments, I call them, where you're like, is any of this working? And that's really a false belief creeping in. And to be able to have a safe place to whisper it to, I could just feel myself. I didn't even care about the ideas and the creativity. I just could feel the surge of belief in me and what I was doing. And I needed that from a safe corner of the world to jump back in and move into these conversations where it was all these promotions for my book and hiring a publicity team, but I wasn't feeling confident to step into those conversations. And to borrow that courage from her allowed me the next day to step into some of these really high level conversations because I could feel the insecurity creeping in saying, what are you doing? You don't know what you're doing. You're self-publishing. You're doing this, that. Is it even selling? These are things that haunt us when we try and step out. And I think that's what I want to say. Go ahead.
I was going to say, which is what makes you a great coach, because you're authentic. You're honest about the challenges you still have. Yes. I mean, you wrote the book on this stuff, and yet you still battled those things yourself. And I think that's what makes you such a great coach, because you're willing to be transparent. You're willing to talk about it as a journey. And anyway, I interrupted you, but I just think that's precisely why you're so great at what you do.
Well, thank you. Well, I just, one of the phrases, one of the beliefs that I really believe is I won't stand on a pedestal. So I see myself as kicking the pedestal out from underneath me, because what does that do? That does not serve anybody to be perceived as being on a pedestal or someone's guru. That's not what we're doing. We're all in this together. We're all in the human condition. And it's also probably an act of humility for me that I have to keep remembering, no matter how many people I work with, however many people I stand up in front, I don't have it all together. And I want to remind people I don't have it all together, but I'm committed to this journey, and I've gotten some handholds. I've gotten some ropes. I love that metaphor. I'm going to be using that, but
Mm.
I've gotten some ropes along the way to help guide people. And I want to say, it gets to be about your clarity. It gets to be about your confidence, and it gets to be about your courage. And don't be afraid to borrow it from someone else. Be wise in who you borrow it from, because they know you. And as you chose some of these people to come around you with your cancer journey, man, I'm sure you were very selective on who you chose on some of those harder
Yeah.
days.
Oh, for sure. And I think I like what you said about choosing wisely, because you don't want flatterers
Hmm.
or, sycophants in your life. That's not helpful.
Hmm.
You need people who actually really do have your best interests at heart.
Hmm.
They don't need anything from you,
Hmm.
and they'll say the hard things.
Hmm.
So I like that. You choose
Well,
well who you borrow things from.
yes.
Courage and confidence, and yeah.
And I'm
Hey,
going
and
to,
I just want, I know we're almost out of time, but I just want to say
yeah.
this. One of the most joyful things about our relationship is knowing where you were when we met, which
Hmm.
was not a great place. You weren't a mess, by the way. I mean, you were always amazing.
I was going to ask you that,
Oh yeah,
because you
yeah.
feel such a mess internally, but
Oh,
how did it look like to you? You feel so
no.
vulnerable when you're in a hard place, don't you?
Well, for sure you did. You do. But
Hmm.
I treasured that you trusted me enough to kind of bring me into that. But you weren't as messy as you thought you were. But anyway, but what I really love is to see the life you've created for yourself, the
Mm,
life you and Darren have crafted for your family. And
mm.
it's just been fun to watch. And
Thank you.
I love that you're offering that to other people. I think, man, we could
Mm.
all use a little bit more Heather Penny and 3Cs in our lives. So thank you.
Oh,
Thank you for being willing to share it all. And so this new book is going to be great. I have no doubt about that.
oh, thank you, Cheryl. And I do feel, I feel like when we need some confirmation in our life, it comes along. And so I feel very blessed that people will reach out and tell me exactly what it is that they're needing and what they're getting from it. And I think the highest praise that I get when I work with people is when they found their clarity and their confidence and their courage, and they're standing on their own 2 feet. I want people to feel like they get to own this for themselves, and they have it all sitting inside of them.
Yeah.
It's almost like lifting weights or taking care of our bodies. We might start out with a 3 pound weight. That's okay. You'll get up to 5 pounds, 10 pounds, 15 pounds. You'll be able to strengthen your identity and your mental resilience to start growing clarity, confidence, courage at a level that you'll be surprised. You'll look back in 3, 4 years and you'll be like, you're a new person, because
Mm.
it's your mindset that's constantly getting renewed and saying, out of this mindset, I really get to go after a life that I'm uniquely made for. And that's why I named the book that. It's basically a true belief. The life you're made for. Everybody has a life they're made for. And if I can help people believe that and go after their own unique life, not try and be a mini me or anyone else or emulate my life, be able to go after their life, I think that's what gives me the most joy and makes me just want to give a standing ovation to the people that I work with, because they're having that courage. I get to be the person behind the scene they're whispering to. And I
Yeah.
need those people as well, that I
Yeah.
just say, am I doing this right? Am I okay? Because we feel that vulnerability when we try and reinvent ourselves or change or do something big, or you put a book out there, it doesn't sell, or you do a painting and nobody wants it. I mean, whatever it is that we're trying to step out in. And I think I just want to keep honoring people stepping out and creating and daring to believe that they get to go after the life they're made for.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up, what are some just encouragement you want to give our listeners?
Oh man. Hmm. Um, I guess just to kind of continue with what we're saying, that be brave enough to be authentic,
Mm-hmm.
not just, I mean, we need to be authentic with ourselves. We need to really figure out who we are and who is
Yeah.
who is our authentic self, for sure. But then be willing to share that with other people. And some of that is sharing our failures as well as our successes. And I think, again, back to what you do so well. Um, and certainly in our marriage and relationship coaching, Neil and I, we've done some things very well in our marriage. We've done some things beautifully in our marriage. Does that help anybody? Not really. It's the stuff we've screwed up. That's the stuff that helps people.
Oh.
It's
Yeah,
so,
I hear
I
you.
think the more honest you're willing to be about some of those things that you've messed up and what you've learned from them. I'm just sharing your failures isn't helpful, but when you're willing to kind of take people with you through that journey of, yeah, I was in a really rough place, or our marriage was in a really tough place, but here's where we are now. That gives people hope. And secondly, when you say, and here's what we had to do to get here, that gives them some tools as well. I think you do that so well. I just think we would be a better world if we were all willing to be a little more authentic. And so I guess, I don't know, that would be I know you deal with some really high powered clients and pretty important executives. And I'm sure it would be very threatening for them to be authentic about their failures.
Yeah.
But man, I think it would unlock some things in their lives and in their companies and in their organizations and in their marriages and their families if we were all willing to be a little bit more honest and authentic about our challenges, our struggles.
I love that. That's an awesome place to leave our listeners. But before I do go, I have to celebrate a major success that I got to see on Facebook. Your first
yes.
You want to tell our listeners, what did you do?
Okay, well, 2 weeks ago, Neil and my husband and I are golfers. I'm not very good. He's pretty good. So I got a hole in one. I was so excited because he's never had one. And I was like pretty thrilled. And I was pretty cocky, actually. I strutted around the house for a couple of weeks. And then yesterday, he got a hole in one. I wasn't with him.
I can't believe that.
But the course that he was golfing that day had a promotion on this one hole, and you had to pay $10. But if you got a hole in one, you got $5,000. And wouldn't you know, he got a hole in one on that hole.
I love it.
$5,000 check. And I'm like, you really just had to one up me, didn't you? Not only did you get a hole in one, you got money. Anyway, so I've been put in my place, but we've had a lot of fun with that. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I love you too. All right. Well, where can people find you, Cheryl?
Well, our organization is familylifecanada.com. Everything we do, and there is a Family Life US as well. We do marriage and family stuff from a Christian worldview. They do it in the States. We do it in Canada, but there's some great stuff on our website if you're interested.
Oh, yeah, awesome.
That's where you can find us.
All right. We'll have that in the show notes too. Love what you and Neil are doing. Thank you so much for how you're serving humanity. And Maria Shriver talks about this, about moving humanity forward. And I think your journalism background, I often think about you and Maria Shriver just because of how you've pivoted over to really the soul work. And I've watched Maria do that as well in her work and putting out her thoughts in the Sunday paper every week. But just want to thank you and Neil for everything you're doing to continuously going after the relationships in our world and helping people set them up for success. So thank you, Cheryl.
You're so welcome. Love you.
Oh, love you too. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us today. We'd love a review. Helps us out quite a bit. Wherever you are, just drop a review, and you can find out more at heatherpenny.com. Cheering you on.